Hello and welcome to the Supernatural track here at Continual. Tonight we are talking about one-hit wonders, those characters that were only in maybe one or two episodes, but we really thought they had potential and we would have loved to have seen more of them. But before we dive into that, let's let my wonderful panelists introduce themselves, starting with Carol.
Hi, I'm Carol Malcolm, the director of the Urban Fantasy track at Dragon Con, and we do cover Supernatural at Con. So, and I had known Gail prior to her falling into the rabbit hole that has become whatever you want to describe it as for you. So then when I found out, oh, she's into the show, then she started doing Supernatural panels for me at Con as well. I have been a fan of the show since it first aired. And once it was over, I realized that it had been a while since I had seen most of the early seasons. I'd seen, occasional episodes here and there, but not, to sit down and watch the whole thing straight through. And that is a time commitment, which I decided I was going to do. And we've been doing virtual panels for that since last year's at the end of, I think we started in February, I think, of 2020, and did the first 5 seasons, then took a break because there was this little thing called Dragon Con that was very they kept me very busy. And so we've been doing Dragon Con, or the Supernatural Rewind series, where once a month we go through one of the older seasons. And this may not air before we do it, but we will be doing the 9th season at the end of December. So anyway, that's kind of the background for me. But I'll be here. Thank you.
Marx.
Hey, I'm Marx Pyle, co-host of the podcast Genretainment. Also a filmmaker, writer, got a Kindle Vella series out that's urban fantasy meets Mission Impossible, called Obsidian Monsters. And also just came out of an anthology of a bunch of different 17 other authors. It's all about dragons of a different tale. I've been a fan of Supernatural since the very first episode, and been enjoying catching back up after the finale. So
one of my rewind stalwarts. Thank you, Mark.
Yes.
Yes. Anna, how about you?
Hi, I'm Anna Kensing. I've been a fan of Supernatural since the beginning, although I did take sort of a bit of a break when it was first airing. I watched the first couple seasons, and then I took a bit of a break and I came back to it later, and then, caught up until the very end. I have dabbled in some fanfic, and I also write MM romance and under this name, and most of my characters are thinly veiled versions of Sam Dean Winchester.
I came late to the party. I fell in love with Supernatural in the middle of season 11, and went, where have you been all my life? Binge watched 11 seasons in 4 months in time for the season 12 opener, and went down the rabbit hole, haven't stopped falling yet. I love doing the rewind panels for Carol and any urban fantasy panels for Carol, but the rewind panel, a lot of fun. And I'm a columnist for the Winchester Family Business blog, and I run the Supernatural TFWNC group. And yeah, we bit obsessed. So I think I'm on my fifth. Committed. Thank you.
Yes.
I'm on my 5th complete rewatch. So 5 times 327, you do the math. It's comfort food. So let's talk about, there's certainly characters that were recurring for numerous seasons, like Bobby and Castiel and many others, Crowley. But then there were the characters that showed up in 1, maybe 2 episodes. We never saw them again. We never heard what happened to them. But somehow they've either surfaced as a favorite in fan fiction, or they just left us wondering, wow, I wonder whatever happened to them. And so let's, we don't even need to do this as a round robin today. Just jump in when you've got somebody. But go ahead, Anna, lead us off.
Yeah. So I'm going to start us off with Cassie Robinson in season 1, because she is such a critical character to reveal Dean Winchester. And it happens early in the series. She shows up, and she is just this major contrast between what Sam, and therefore we the viewers, have thought about Dean, as like Sam thinks of him as sort of my slutty older brother who just does one night stands all the time, and uses women and it turns out that Dean not only is capable of sort of an emotional sort of inner life, but he has fallen in love, and he's actually a little bit shocked and dismayed to find out that Sam finds this surprising about him. Because he's like, what? Yeah, so I fell in love. People do that, right? And he's like, what's and she just revealed so much about him in the first half of the show that I think that she's a really critical character, and it's really a shame that we never heard about her again, that we didn't find out what happened to her. She's briefly mentioned in the episode where the books come out, Chuck and Chuck the prophet who writes the supernatural books, she's briefly mentioned in there, and not even by name, right? Dean just says, he's got me right, having sex, I'm full frontal here, dude, but her name's not even mentioned. So it's really too bad that she's never mentioned it again. And it's it's just, she just reveals this softness of Dean, this completeness in terms of his emotional life, and this contrast between Dean, who dates her for a week and then tells the whole story about the big secret, whereas Sam has been dating Jessica for a year. He's looking at engagement rings. He may marry this girl, and he still hasn't told her this. And I mean, that also reveals that Dean is a terrible liar. He lies to people by omission, right? Not by actively lying, whereas Sam can lie, and make you be convinced that the sky is green, because he just, he's very, very good at that. But so, yeah, I think that she's just really a major, major figure in setting up who Dean Winchester is. And it's too bad that we didn't get any more of her.
Well, even if she hung around not as a love interest, they could have decided that this wasn't going to work. But she was also such a fearless reporter that I could see her showing up, either giving them tips to cases or following up with them because she is chasing a case and going, I know you guys know something. And there could always be that kind of tension, even if they weren't doing anything anymore together as a couple. Yeah, she was on my list as somebody who would have been fascinating.
It's sort of natural, you understand why Dean, when Sam dies after Swan Song, why he goes to Lisa, and Ben, and as sort of that kind of substitute for that sort of familial substitute. His dad's dead, Sam's dead. You can kind of understand why he goes to Lisa, because of the kid and all that sort of stuff. And so it's not even that I wanted Dean to go back and rekindle a relationship with him. But yeah, I agree. She could have shown up periodically. They did have some closure at the end of that episode, that they were clearly not going to get back together. But it's just really too bad that she's just never mentioned again at all.
Yeah. Well, and that happens to a lot of folks. So who else do you have on your list, guys?
Well, can I make one? I want to make one slight comment to what Anna was talking about. Your observation about the fact that Sam was surprised at, that Dean had this, what seemed to be kind of a committed, serious relationship with this person, even though I don't think it went on for very long. But in any case, the reason that struck me as funny is that during my rewatch and I believe it was this season, and what rewatching the season 9 episodes, I have a note to myself that says, and maybe it was last season, I don't know, about how Dean's the one always making all the sly comments about the women and always looking at the women, and always Sam's the one who's always hooking up with people. So it was just kind of funny when you said that. I thought, okay, well, so well. But I'll go ahead and throw one out there. I loved Lenore the vampire, partially because I really liked Amber Benson's portrayal, and Amber's a wonderful person in her own right. And we do know what happened to her, so it's not as though we couldn't. But I always wished we could have seen more of her. And I'm not taking issue with the way she died, but I think it would have been, because it made sense for that plot line. But I do think it would have been nice if we could have seen more of her in between, the episode where she was introduced and then the one where she was killed. So I really thought that she was a turning point for them, simply because they had to realize, that was one of the first times they realized that maybe these monsters aren't all bad. Maybe these other beings, these other creatures deserve a chance.
Mm-hmm.
Just gonna imagine that her and Benny are hanging out in purgatory.
That's right. That's a good idea. Yeah, good point. Yeah, that'd be a good spin-off. Purgatory featuring
Lenore and Benny. Yeah.
So, Marx, who comes to your mind?
I didn't have Lenore on my list. So we just watched season 8 last month. So there's a lot of what I think are backdoor pilots. They're written like backdoor pilots. And one that I really liked a lot that I kind of wish they had at least had the characters reappear was the Freaks and Geeks one. Chrissy Chambers, Aiden, Josephine. And because I thought I liked Chrissy. Aiden he's kind of a jerk, but that actor's great in The Order and The Magician. So he would have done a great job with that character, showing different layers to him. And it would have been even if they didn't do the spinoff, it would have been just great to have them reappear at some point, this new generation. And, even if Garth was trying to guide them or something, who knows? That would have been a really interesting spinoff with Garth in charge. But yeah, I thought they had a lot of potential, and it felt like, unlike some of the other backdoor pilots, like the Chicago one, I can't remember the name of it now, Bloodlines maybe.
Bloodlines.
It still felt like supernatural and felt like a natural extension to it.
I think it should have been called Garth in Charge.
Yeah. And you all named some folks who were on my list, but we did eventually get Jody and Donna as recurring characters. But before that, we had Sheriff Kathleen in The Benders. Mm-hmm. We had Diana Ballard in The Usual Suspects, and we had Linda Blair playing a detective in another one of the episodes. And I thought all of them really were very believable, likable, potentially intriguing characters. And I would have loved to have seen more of them because Supernatural could have used a few more recurring women who, stuck around and didn't die. And particularly with Sheriff Ballard, that episode with the Benders happened in Hibbing. Well, later on, there's Hibbing 911. So where was Sheriff Ballard where Donna and Jody were at the sheriff's convention in Hibbing? She really should have been there. And I thought all of them came to their parts a little differently, but I would have put all of those women together in Supernatural, and you've got Gunpowder Milkshake, the Supernatural version, and it would have been, maybe throw in Mrs. Tran too, because she was badass, and that would have been perfect. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think that was a good one. Who else? Because I've got a big list. I'm sure you do too. So who else would you have come back?
So if we're gonna sort of make references to Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Dawn and Maggie Stark in season 7, the Shut Up Dr. Phil episode, where Charisma Carpenter and James Marsters are married witches, like 800-year-old witches, or maybe even older than that. And they're going through an acrimonious, disastrous, apocalyptic divorce. And it's just hilarious. And like, I know that season 7 is not a lot of people's favorites because there's so many lies, Bobby dies, but I love the Leviathan storyline. And it was just really kind of awesome to have this hilarious episode that, you know, carries forward the overall arc to an adequate extent, but really is just standalone awesome. Like, they were just, it was clear that those actors just embraced their evil witch roles and their, you know, War of the Roses, feuding married people who know everything about each other and hate each other because of it, but also are still in love with each other. And they were just so good at it. It was so hilarious. And I, you know, like, I understand that James Marsters apparently like paid to have one of those busts of, you know, Don Stark like shipped to his house like after the show because, you know, who's narcissistic doesn't matter. But it was such a great episode. And, you know, like, I really do appreciate sort of all of the like callbacks to Buffy that the show has. You know, Amber Benson's character and, you know, like a whole bunch of other characters that show up, but those two in particular, I think that they, like, I can just imagine that they got the, you know, sort of either, I don't know whether they auditioned for the part or whether they were invited to audition for the part, but I just can just imagine that they just jumped at that chance to play two characters who are in some ways similar to the characters they played on Buffy, but in other ways just completely different, and just like embraced it and just had so much fun with it.
Yeah, they really ran with it. Who else?
Well, I liked Hendrix. You know, after in the beginning, he was a real jerk, but I think we discussed this during the Rewind panel for the season where he died, that it would have been kind of cool to have him still around later, just so they would have kind of a connection on the inside, you know, rather than a pretend, you know, that the fact that, you know, that he could have been somebody who was, you know, provided some kind of support. And I thought that the way that they handled his, you know, his eye-opening to what was going on and what these guys actually did and what was really happening that he didn't understand, I thought they did a good job of making it not too abrupt, I guess you could say, where, you know, it made sense in the, you know, in the progression of the show, just in the few episodes. Wasn't he only in like 3 episodes or something? So, you know, but I thought they handled that pretty well, because for most of us, we'd think, you know, 3 episodes, that is pretty abrupt, but they did a good job with it.
Yeah, I agree. How about you, Marx?
Well, since I'm on season 8 and we just watched it not too long ago, I think another character or characters that I wish they had brought back at some point was from Everybody Hates Hitler, Aaron Bass and the Golem. Yeah, I think that would have been great to have return, and that whole, you know, that whole secret society, the Thole and the Men of Letters and everything, they could have really played with those elements some more. And it's a shame we didn't see him at least one more time.
Yeah. He comes in season 12, you know, sort of tangentially, like he makes a brief appearance in season 12. But yeah, he was on my list too. And I just really liked that sort of like Gen X, like straddling the line between Gen X and Gen Y, like secular Jew who's just like impatient with his grandfather's obsession with the religion that doesn't mean anything to him personally. You know, like I just like I know a lot of people like that. And he used the books of the pages from the book that his grandfather gave him to control the golem for rolling papers instead of for what they're
that was fun.
You know, and then the sort of like sexual like tension and innuendo between him and Dean is also, you know, just really kind of hilarious. You know, he like catches Dean's eye like in the coffee shop and, you know, meets up with him later, and Dean is like, you know, sort of staking him out for whatever's going on. And he's like, oh, we didn't have a thing. He's like, no thing. And he tells his family later, he's like, yeah, I thought that I, had something, but it turns out it was just a gay thing. So whatever.
Loved his outsider point of view on the boys, where, Sam and Dean are doing what they do. They dig up a grave and they burn the corpse. And he's sitting in the car with the golem, and Sam just very casually warms his hands over the flames, like one would do. And Aaron looks at them horrified and goes, they're psychopaths. And, to an outsider, we see this through Sam and Dean's eyes the whole time. So it's kind of normalized. But if you're somebody who's seeing this for the first time, and these guys not only dig up and burn a corpse, but then, why not bring out the hot dogs? That would kind of freak you out. Somebody that was on my list was Dorothy from Oz. We only got to see her really in one episode. And I really wish that instead of killing Charlie off, they'd have just sent her into Oz with Dorothy, and they could have always brought her back when things permitted, but I would have much rather had her off in, the Emerald City than dead. And I just thought Dorothy was such a badass. I'm never going to look at The Wizard of Oz the same way again. So I would have loved to have seen Dorothy.
That episode is probably one of my favorites of the whole series. I really like the way I'm always a fan of anybody who can meld these different worlds. Mm-hmm. And, and that to me was just a great episode for a number of reasons, but we'll talk about that on the 30th.
Yes. Marx?
Oh, another one? Let me look at my list real quick. I think let's see here. You already talked about Deanna Ballard, Linda Blair. One really small part that I wish they had brought back again was Dr. Robert, played by Robert Englund. Because I just liked this kind of random character pops in. Obviously, it's Freddy Krueger and such, and then he's got this past with their dad and their family and stuff. And they mention him once or twice more later, but we never see him again. It would have been kind of interesting to explore that character one more time to see what kind of crazy mad scientist they would get into. Mad doctor.
Yeah.
Because that's all the show needs is a mad scientist. But okay.
Yeah.
Everyone needs a mad scientist. I'm going to toss out somebody who really only got 2 episodes, and I didn't realize how few episodes she was in, because she looms large in fan fiction, and you think she's been in most of the show, and then you realize Missouri Mosley was only in like 2 episodes.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. Yeah.
She was so good. Just her yelling at Dean for things he had only thought about and hadn't done yet, and the look on his face, don't put your dirty boots on my coffee table, and he hadn't even moved. You're thinking about it. She just was so wonderful, and yet so soft spoken, and yet she had so much power and dignity about her. And again, I wish she could have gone off somewhere instead of getting killed off. That was such a waste. But I would have loved to have seen her be more of a go-to person for the boys all along. When they needed something that couldn't be found through normal research, we trust Missouri. Dad trusted Missouri. So, this should be okay. Who else?
Yeah. And she was really maternal to the boys, sort of in that kind of, stern headmistress kind of, who only, slaps your hand with the ruler because she cares kind of way, they could sense that, they could tell that they could trust her. They could tell that they could go to her. They could tell that they could tell her things. And I think that I would have liked to have her be, Bobby's irreplaceable, right? Like Bobby was sort of, that kind of librarian of the supernatural, but Missouri could have been a similar sort of maternal figure to that, and it's a shame that she wasn't used that way.
It's interesting because in the anime series, She actually shows up in several episodes, 4 or 5. And she's mostly the same, but since it's anime, she's actually portrayed more almost like a shaman. And it's an interesting juxtaposition. So who else? Because we've got, 15 seasons and lots of walk-on parts, but some of them were more memorable than others.
But just speaking of characters that feel like they were in it a lot more than they were, even though he's in it more than she was, Missouri was Ash. Because I always feel like Ash was a lot more than just a few episodes in one season. And the Roadhouse, even. That location feels so iconic, but yet it was only in that one season.
And heaven.
Yes, in heaven.
Right.
So Ash was always a favorite that I wish that we could have gotten a little bit more of him. He was just such a great over the top kind of character that was.
Yeah. And Ash was kind of, he wasn't the last, but he was sort of like part of the, like there's a division at some point, and I'm not precisely sure where it is, but there's a division at some point in the series where they get kind of away from the sort of blue collar, lower class like roots of it, where like the dive bars and the ripped jeans and just the sense that you have of these boys that live in their car and only occasionally splurge for a hotel, that they're just like not always that clean, and Ash was sort of a part of that, like the sort of mad scientist lair that he had in a bar, in a dive bar, right? And then
his back room,
his back room, he's like chugging a beer right before he gives them the information that they need to stop the apocalypse. I like that aspect of the show, because there really was nothing like that on television at the time, and I don't think that there is now either. And then it got into the bunker, and they're sort of like living this like sort of more subsidized lifestyle, and their suits got better, and like those boys can wear tea towels and they would look hot, but the suits were like, they shoplifted those suits from the Men's Warehouse. They didn't get them at Brooks Brothers like they did at the later end of the series, And
I think they shopped
like a part of that.
Kmart.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and Ash was a part of that, and then they got away from that.
Yeah, too much polyester in those suits to even be Men's Warehouse.
You're right. You're absolutely right.
Well, and someone that was such, we talked about this last month, or maybe in season 7 for season 7 panel, for the Rewind panel, about Garth. The fact that he was a lot more than a one-hit wonder, but the man only appeared in 7 episodes of the whole show, and you would not have. I was astounded when I found that out, and when I discovered it, and I just, when you think about the impact that the character had, I guess part of it's because they talk about him many times, even when he's not there. Sometimes they get a phone call from him. The first time he's mentioned is I think his Weekend at Bobby's, when Bobby's talking to him on the phone, and I think he asked him, "How are you still alive?" or something like that. So we get an idea of what Garth is like. But that's somebody I wish we had seen more of, just because I think he would have, been able to add. And I second your idea, Mark, for a Garth spinoff, since he is one of the people who did manage to still live through the.
It's like supernatural head of the class.
That's right. That's right. Werewolf or not, still.
Yeah. Still hunting.
We talked about the Dawn and Maggie Stark, but I would have loved to have seen more of Patrick, the card sharp witch, the one in The Curious Case of Dean Winchester, who was making people lose the years, and Dean and Bobby and all. Yeah. I thought he was fascinating. And he would have been an interesting recurrent frenemy who was playing his own game, just like Fortuna, the goddess in The Gamblers.
Yeah,
and
I was thinking about her too. Yeah,
so cool. And we only got to see her once, but she had a lot of presence. So I would have liked to have seen, you know, plenty of gods and goddesses walked in and out of their show all the time. So why not her?
Why not?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Who else?
I wouldn't mind
So
seeing.
oh,
sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, I wouldn't mind seeing Robert Picardo again as the Leprechaun. I think he could have been interesting, almost like a cue, like influence almost. I guess another trickster, right? You don't have. We lost Gabriel after a while, but I would like to see him again and some more fairy fun of some sort.
Mhm.
There's so much fae lore. It'd been interesting to explore a little bit more of that.
You fight those fairies, Sam.
Yeah, that was
Fight the
hilarious.
fairies.
That was hilarious. You know, speaking of Robert Picardo, is the first time I ever saw him in anything was China Beach. I was a huge China Beach fan back in the 90s.
Mm.
And, you know, then to see him in so many genre things since then, he's great. I mean, he was great then. And, you know, but I got to give the man credit. He will do anything. If somebody says, here, you want to play a leprechaun? Sure.
Yeah.
You know what?
Yeah.
There was a couple that I thought was fascinating. And again, I would have loved to have seen more of them, was Jesse and Caesar, the two hunters in the Chitters. And they were going to retire. And they were together, but they had just been hunting the creature that had killed Jesse's brother. And now they were done. And, you know, Dean said, let them out. We're not going to pull them into our mess. But I love anytime we got to see hunters who did get some kind of connection, permanent connection to somebody else. And so I was happy to see them. And I would have loved to have found out that the two guys from the Supernatural Convention actually ended up going into hunting and
Yeah.
They gave up fixing copiers because now they had this new confidence from having fought the ghost with Sam and Dean and taken after their role-playing characters and gone into it. That I would have loved to have seen that.
I don't know if I want them to do that.
I don't know if they would survive.
I don't know if they would survive. And it's such a, because aside from Jesse and his partner, like it's just such a lonely, dangerous life. And those guys were so sweet. Those copier fixing fanfic conference, you know, convention attending guys, they were so sweet, and I wouldn't want anything to happen to them. But yeah, like I agree that I hope that they found the courage to do new and exciting things with their lives.
They could have been hunter documentarians or something.
Yeah. There you go.
You know, or like the historians for the hunters. I don't know, something that wouldn't have involved field work, but you know, somebody with that had the background knowledge or something. That would have been interesting.
Or maybe ones who took the really super simple cases that way they could free up the more experienced hunters for things that were more dangerous. But you know, they took the really minor but annoying hauntings and things like that.
Yeah. Minor but annoying.
Right? Yeah. Your standard cursed object that you just need to find and then set fire to. Yeah.
The ghosts that haven't gotten to killing people yet. They're just, you know, causing noises and stuff. So you can
hides people's car keys. Yeah.
So a character that like looms kind of large for me, for possibly only because my absolute hands down favorite fanfiction writer is maybe the only person who writes /fic with this character, and so therefore this might be the reason why he looms sort of large with me. But Deacon Kaler from season 2, Folsom Prison Blues, he was the prison warden in that the boys get themselves like sent to in order to clear a, you know, whatever's haunting the prison and killing the inmates. And so he's like, I don't know where he would fit kind of in the future, but there's clearly so very, very much more about him and to him than we ever find out, because, you know, like he knows about the supernatural. Like he's an old army buddy or Marine buddy of John's, right? And so, but he obviously knows enough about what John did that he calls John's sons when he has when he can A, recognize a supernatural problem in the prison that he's the warden of, and B, knows the guy to call to get it fixed, right? So how does he know these things? Where did he learn these things? You know, it just, you just sort of like wonder, like, what else is going on in Deacon's life? And so, you know, like he shows up in the episode and he's just the warden of the prison, and he punches Dean out in order to, you know, like get them to escape. And then Dean punches him out in order to properly escape. It's a whole thing. And, you know, he's delightful, but there's just, it's sort of an example, particularly in the early seasons, of how the show worked really hard to demonstrate that even the minor characters that only showed up for one episode had complete and full lives beyond what was going on. And you just didn't know everything about them. And they don't just serve this particular plot line, although they do that, but they have other things happening in their life. And, you know, I just really wonder, like, what's going on with Deacon now? Is he, like, does he have any more supernatural problems in his prison? Has he fixed it? Is he doing anything else? What's happening with him?
Well, Pastor Jim is one of those who barely gets a mention, looms much larger in fan fiction. Shows up along with Daniel Elkins and Caleb that just barely get a mention in the show. But again, these were the grown-ups in the boys' lives when they were little that John dragged them around to, or maybe left them with if he didn't leave them with Bobby. And that kind of fascinates me because they would have known the boys at different times in their life before they were badass hunters, separate from John. And it would have been, we got to see a little bit of that with Sonny and Bad Boys, who knew Dean, you know, but I would have loved to have seen a little more of that side. And of course, we get to explore it in fan fiction, but, you know, would have been nice to see on the screen. Who else?
So I forgot to put this on my list, and he dies, so he can't come back, but maybe he could work something out. And who is the guy? He's from, I think he's in Eureka, the actor is, but the whole bank robbery shapeshifter episode early in the season.
Ronald.
The Mandroid. Ronald.
Yeah, the Mandroid, laser beams, eyes. I think
he was just
hilarious. I would love to see him come back as a ghost and just haunt the boys and have all these weird ideas, conspiracy ideas. They're totally off.
Yeah. Have you thought of this? Have you thought this might be what's going on? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you know,
he almost made my list.
Yeah. Asa Fox is another one. Of course, we never meet him. He's dead by the time he shows up in the show, and it's all about his funeral. But there's certainly history there with Mary, who saved him when he was little and kind of put him on the hunting road. There's some implied relationship between Asa and Jody, that they might have been more than friends or hunting buddies. And it just would have been interesting to see more of him if they were going to do that whole episode about, you know, his funeral. I would have loved to have seen a little more, especially that Mary was apparently sneaking off to hunt werewolves when the boys were little. What did she say? I'm going out to play bunco, John. Don't wait up for me.
Yeah.
Especially because when she would come back, you know, she must have looked at least partially a mess.
Yeah, it was a rough bunco game. Those ladies at the bridge club play hard.
Well, and someone we talked about from the first few seasons also, and who, you know, deserved what he got, but who was really good, was Gordon. And I'll say it again, Sterling K. Brown looks exactly the same now as he did at that time.
Yeah, it's vampire.
Like, seriously, like 15 years ago, he must have been. And I swear, if I ever meet that man, I'm going to ask him what his secret is. But in any case, his character was somebody, I mean, that he's such a great actor. And you would just, you know, even back then, and you just sit back and wonder, well, what's Gordon going to do next? You knew it was going to be something bad. But, you know, and as I said, he deserved he deserved to end up no longer being with us. You know, did he deserve to become a vampire? Maybe. But, you know, he was a great character. I thought that was only, what, 3 or 4 episodes? Something like that.
Yeah.
And that I'm not sure I would have wanted to see more, just because I think it fit really well, you know, what they did with him. But I think that it was somebody that they really did justice to the character, that they managed to show us, I think that they had the character go where they wanted him to go, and that it was believable to us at the same time. And I think that that's a nice arc for somebody to have.
Yeah. 2 of the people that I really thought by the end of season 15 that they would kind of do an Avengers Assemble thing and bring a number of people back in, and maybe they would have without the current unpleasantness. But I wanted to see what happened to the Baines twins, Twix twins. I would have loved to have seen how that worked out for them, because he kind of pulled a Dean and didn't let her die and sent her into that twig creature, and could have gone really well, could have gone really bad. But I would have loved to have at least gotten some closure on, well, you know what happened to them, or something. And just for laughs, Mildred, the older woman at the nursing home, I think Eileen was in that, they were hunting the banshee, and she kept feeling up Dean's leg, and Dean kept pushing her and back down. She kept creeping back up. And it was just, she made it not skeevy. It was funny. And Dean was perfectly capable of, you know, taking care of himself, but she, you know, I think we all identified with her in that scene. And it was,
I know a lot of people who would agree with you, but yeah.
I just love putting the moves on Dean, and he's kind of horrified. I'm not quite sure what to do.
And speaking of slightly less sympathetic cougars, the entire family of Bunny LaCroix, except for Olivia, the illegitimate daughter of Bunny, who's just boring and is the shapeshifter that, you know, the entire plot revolves around, but whatever. But Hetty and Beverly, the Bunny's like waspy cousins who are, you know, like feeling up Sam and Dean. I think Hetty suggests a threesome with both the boys, and it's another instance of the boys being mistaken as gay, because, you know, they console themselves with, well, I mean, obviously they're gay because they're not interested in us, and why wouldn't they be?
Right,
hilarious.
And Sam's put upon look when Dean keeps stranding him with them, and he's sitting there on the couch between them. He's like, "Oh, you are gonna pay. I am super gluing everything you own for leaving me here." Yeah. Marx, how about you?
I think we need a sequel to Scooby Natural, except Robert Picardo's character would bring the Scooby gang out into the real world where we have live actors, and there'd be hijinks going on.
Yes, it would.
No,
Yes,
I did love that episode, and it would have been fun to do some more. Like they were going to have, you know, seasons earlier, they're going to have Jason from Friday the 13th in an episode, but they couldn't get the rights to work out. But I love that they do that kind of experimentation, crossovers.
You know, a hardcore person that would have been interesting to see what happened to her was Tamara. Remember, she and her husband in the one with the 7 deadly sins, they make him drink like Drano, and she just goes off for vengeance. And it's like, you know, I could see her surviving and becoming an absolute terror. And it would have just been interesting to see, well, she's cut a swath through Arkansas, you know, and just nothing gets in her way.
What are we going to do about Tamara?
Yeah. She could have kind of gone the Gordon route.
Right.
But it would have been interesting because we didn't get to see that many female hunters. And then there was Annie, the foxhole lady. So many foxholes.
Oh yeah, that was hilarious. Yeah.
But she's another hunter.
3 guys, yeah.
So yeah, who haven't we mentioned, folks?
Kate the werewolf.
Oh, Kate the werewolf.
Oh yeah.
What's happening with her? Yeah.
Because they mentioned her again. You know, that, okay, well, here's an example of someone that we let go, that,
Mhm.
you know, they made a conscious decision to not track her down, which they probably could have done. But, you know, that would have been kind of interesting if she had, you know, popped up again in some episode, not, you know, not in a bad way, but maybe even in some kind of a helpful way. So, you know, just to get an idea of how had she managed to do, you know, what she had said she was going to do and all of that. So that was that was an interesting episode anyway. And just, I think that would have been kind of cool to find out what, you know, what had transpired with her 2 years later or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a character that, you know, we do know what happens to him and we don't really need him to come back, but just sort of like loomed large in terms of like a character development and demonstrating, you know, sort of what it is about these boys' relationship is Nick Monroe, the siren in Sex and Violence, who spends the first half of the episode appearing, you know, as the, you know, to men in strip clubs as strippers, all with Disney princess names, Belle, Jasmine, Aurora, and I forget what the fourth one was, but so the siren shows up, you know, like as these men's ideals, and then the viewer is supposed to believe that the doctor, the coroner doctor person that Sam is like interviewing, must be the siren because she's attracted to Sam, and Sam may, you know, like Sam is attracted to her, and maybe he's gonna, you know, sleep with her, maybe he's not, but then he does, and so obviously she must be the siren. Except no, it turns out that the siren is this this male FBI agent who is preying on what Dean really wants, which is his brother, trusting him again, looking up to him again, liking the things that he likes again, and just sort of, you know, like wanting to be with him again. And yes, it fuels a lot of fanfic speculation about Dean's sexuality, but it also, you know, sort of demonstrates kind of the, like, because this is in season 4, the sort of like a codependent, messed up nature of their Sam and Dean's relationship. And then it turns out that in terms of characters who wonder what happened to them, the coroner doctor lady Sam does sleep with, and she's one of the few women that Sam sleeps with and doesn't die. So
as far as we know,
she's fine.
As far as no.
As far as we know,
As far as
so
we
maybe
know.
she's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you know what? Somebody else I thought they would bring back in the end to kind of bolster their ranks was Jesse the Antichrist. As far as we know, he's still hanging out in Australia. So,
that's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
you know, where do people in Australia go if they want to go to the other end of the world? Iceland? I mean, you know, I just thought that was...
They'll have phones there, apparently.
Oh, yeah. Okay. You do know there are planes now. It's not like, you know.
Nope, not to Australia, apparently.
Apparently not.
I've seen him come back and him and Jack going on this long road trip. And, you know, well, okay, you're a Nephilim, I'm a half demon, but we have a lot in common, bro. And just Jack and Jesse, the road trip. I'd pay money for that.
Yeah.
Well, folks, we are through our time, and we've certainly hit a lot of the high points. The only other person I still had on my list was Ramiel, Prince of Hell, who only got one episode, but I thought he could have been interesting for more than one. Any other names you want to just throw out there without comment?
I had Frank Devereaux.
Frank
Devereaux.
Yeah.
I didn't really think one way or another about him, or when I originally watched this season, but when we did Rewind, I actually liked him a lot more the second time around. I was kind of sorry to see him die, but if anybody could fake their death,
it would be him.
It would be him. So
he's with Jesse in Australia.
That's right. Or maybe with the doctor from the Siren episode. They all escaped together. Yeah.
Yes. Well, folks, thank you so much for being here. And before we end, let's go around and let everybody know where they can find you online, starting with you, Carol.
Yes. If you go to Facebook and just type in DragonCon Urban Fantasy, you will go directly to the track page there. That's where you're going to find updates. I keep the page active all year long. So It's a little quieter at times like this during the holidays because, everybody has other things going on. But it is one place to find out what's going on the track. Most things are announced there. For the actual content that is going to be linked to both the Facebook page and our Twitter account, which again, you can just type in DragonCon Urban Fantasy and it will be there. Our YouTube channel has all of our panels about supernatural, author interviews, all kinds of things, because the track I'm a hybrid track, and so I divide my programming up halfway between the media that we cover and the book related topics. So if you go to YouTube and type in DragonCon Urban Fantasy, you'll find us there.
Awesome. Marx?
You can find me at marxpyle.com, also genretainment.com, genre entertainment smashed together in genretainment. And then also book stuff at cabotcrossing.com. And I'm over on Twitter at Mr. Marx.
Nice. Anna?
I'm at annakensing.com and on Instagram at Anna Kensing.
Awesome. And I'm pretty easy to find at gailzmartin.com, morganbryce.com. As long as you spell them right, you will find me on social media under both of those names. I write articles for the Winchester Family Business blog. I run the Supernatural TFWNC group here on Facebook. You can often find me on the DragonCon Urban Fantasy Supernatural Rewind panels, but most of the time I hang out here on Continual. So thank you all so much for being with us tonight. And thanks to all of you for watching and listening. There'll be more Supernatural coming up soon on Continual, so we'll see you online.